It's just tragic that it's moments like this that bring us to shul for, difficult reason. And I'm glad you're here. I'm also glad to see Vasav Mehta and members of the Hindu community that are here to show solidarity, as well as I know others of you that have come as well, whose names I don't know. Most houses of worship our size don't need 3 security guards on a Shabbos. I'm really not sure how badly we need it either, but it's a precaution. It's important for us to, feel secure, even though the security of the Jewish people has been deeply shaken from the events of this past week. I've got a sermon with notes, and I'm not sure I'm going to keep to it, but I'm going to try to at least come back to it occasionally. But today the Jewish people are a traumatized people. The atrocities that we have been witnessing from Hamas's inhumane terrorist attack on Israel has left us all emotionally scarred and fearful about the future. One message ought to be very clear. There is evil in the world. That's all you can call it. We can talk about all the terrible problems in the world and the unfairness and the injustice. But what we saw last Saturday was pure evil, and there's no other excuse. Our news outlets, some of them may still call Hamas militants. BBC will not call Hamas a terrorist organization. What is the definition of a terrorist according to Webster's dictionary? The accepted definition of terrorism: those who target and kill civilians to advance a political or ideological goal. It fits the very definition of terrorism. Those that don't use that definition are morally blind. I have a problem. Lately, I think about things and it makes me cry. If it happens, ignore it. And I'll come back shortly. But this has been a rough time. When you see people demonstrating in London in huge numbers, Palestine will be free from the river to the sea, they're talking about the genocide of the Jewish people. That's what they're talking about. It's very clear. What you saw, the way Hamas acted, was reminiscent of the Einsatzgruppen that we witnessed during the darkest days of Jewish history during the Holocaust. A complete disregard. I mean, to see a father, how to get through this, who's thankful, said, Baruch Hashem, his daughter is dead because she was captured by Hamas, because the prospect of her living through that hell was unbearable. So, militants, they are not. It implies people fighting a military battle. They are not. These were not militants, but terrorists out to destroy as many human lives as they could. The Hindu community that is here understands their own battles with that kind of terrorism. They didn't care if the victims were men, women, children, the elderly, babies shot up, beheaded. Among the victims were hundreds of young people, probably peaceniks attending a music festival, didn't have a peaceful time, sad. We listened to the news with a mixture of deep sadness and great fury. How could human lives be of so little value? Israeli parents now mourning their children, children mourning their parents, little children who hid under the dead bodies of their parents, wondering whether they're going to see their families, their captive friends again. And in the midst of all this suffering, you might ask, Rabbi, please give us a message of hope. Where's the hope? The hope lies in the idea that we can fight the terror. We can fight this evil if we retain our moral clarity. I have to really say Biden and the administration have maintained that moral clarity very powerfully. I was just talking to Mickey Fabry. Reminded me of something very important, gave me a little lesson on politics that, before 45, the rules of armed conflict were that if your enemy does not follow those rules, you are under no obligation to do so. After 45, it became a little more sketchy, and we're supposed to all follow these rules of armed conflict. But when Bush went into Afghanistan and said, I'm fighting al-Qaeda and I'm fighting the Taliban, he publicly said, we're fighting an enemy that does not follow the rules of armed conflict, and neither will we. Well, Israel will. One of our congresswomen in Atlanta, I was just speaking to her yesterday, she signed onto a bill advanced by AOC in New York, making sure that Israel follows those rules of armed conflict. And not a word in that resolution about condemning the atrocities of Hamas. She's thinking about taking her signature off that bill. I hope she will. But this is the challenge that we're at here. We're fighting two wars. It isn't just the war against the barbarity of Hamas, which Israel will win ultimately. Very fearful of Iran getting involved. By the way, this is not a war between Israel and Hamas. This is a war between Israel and Iran. Iran completely funds and directs and helps Hamas in its planning, gives them training, provides them rockets. They're doing the same thing for Hezbollah. I worry that the operation going on in Gaza right now is a way to get Israel tied up in the south so that Hezbollah can unleash many, many more and more sophisticated rockets in the north. This is a very treacherous, dark time. Israel will survive this war. Imagine if Iran had the nuclear weapon, which they're working very hard to get. So there's two wars. There's the war that Israel is fighting, and there's the war for public opinion that we cannot sit down. I'll be okay. We cannot be silent anymore. There are concrete actions that we can take. Write your congressmen, write your senators. By the way, when I see a Twitter, I go onto Twitter because I'm a masochist. And when I see anything reported and the response is free Palestine, 8 million times, I get up there and I post free Palestine from Hamas. If Palestine was free from Hamas, because there are good Palestinian civilians who are, living in fear and, they can't speak out. I mean, the fact of the matter is, how many of these people cannot speak out? You cannot go, those that advance causes that are dear to us, to have freedom and justice, equal rights for women and all. Those people, if they were protesting in places like Iraq or Afghanistan or Iran, women can't even protest by taking off a hijab in Iran without risking their lives. And yet we run and we protest for every little thing but look at what's going on in the rest of the world. So the other war that we're responsible to fight here is the war for public opinion. We stayed too silent during the Shoah because we didn't really know what was going on, a lot of us. But I want to point out some history. This week, 80 years ago, a group of 400 rabbis came to Washington, D.C. to meet with Franklin D. Roosevelt about the Jews being killed and persecuted in Europe. They were refused entry into the White House. That's not what's happening today. The response from the White House, thank God, has been spot on. Very different than what was taken back then as actions. The unified voice of Congress, who hardly agree on anything these days, so far agree on this. I worry how long that'll go. I was talking to a friend of mine in the Dunwoody Police Department, who's from Germany, gets the security thing. He was just actually training in Israel from the SCN. He was there in Israel doing counterterrorism training, Major Fladrich. And he says to me, in the past, the world gave Israel 8 to 10 days. Maybe this time the world will give Israel a month until we start hearing the voices crying out, which, Israel doesn't want civilian casualties. Hamas glorifies in civilian casualties. By the way, where is Egypt? The Sinai is virtually empty. They could set up a tent city overnight if they wanted to in Sinai. Why don't they? They don't want them either. Part of it also from Jordan, it's because they want to keep the pressure on Israel. That's why Hamas does not want to let its civilians get out of Gaza. They want to see civilian casualties. That's their war for public opinion. We have a responsibility to make sure the world knows what's going on. We need to not be silent. Write these letters to your congressman. It's very easy today on a computer. Call, very easy to call and just level your opinion because they're hearing from the other side as well. And we need to stand firm and do what is right. I'm concerned about how things play out when Israel does what they must. And Israel has no choice. This isn't, and by the way, it should not be Israel's fight. This is a fight of decency against indecency. That's all it is. It's a war of self-defense against an enemy that doesn't follow the rules of armed conflict. Protection of civilians when they are captured. Complete and total brutality. And so while that war is continuing and Israel, God willing, will win that war and quickly, we got our own wars here. The terrible uptick in anti-Semitism. One of the synagogues, I was talking to the rabbi, 80% of the kids didn't go to preschool. They're afraid. Beth Shalom does much better. 75% of our kids were here. There were still those that are afraid, and I'm still hearing from people that is it safe to come to shul? It's safe to come to shul. And you know what? That's what they want. They want you to be terrorized. This is not the time to be terrorized. This is the time for unity. This is the time to stick together. I posted a wonderful little video on Facebook of an Orthodox soldier getting ready to go into Gaza saying, I want you to rock the house this Shabbat. I can't daven this Shabbat. Normally I would be bringing in Kabbalat Shabbat with all kinds of simcha and dancing. I'm not going to be able to do it. Do me a favor, Jewish people. He said, Am Yisrael, get to shul. Be proud of who you are. That's why I know many of you are here today. So we have to continue that battle for public opinion. I have been on so many, congressional lobby sessions in the last few days. But the point has to be made over and over again. Israel has a right to defend itself, as it is Hamas who is choking off normal life in Gaza. They are the ones that divert international aid to build rockets, take the concrete to build tunnels, attack tunnels. They're trying to keep the civilians from moving out of harm's way, because unlike Israel that does everything it can to protect civilian life, Hamas wants to see civilian casualties to keep the pressure on Israel. And so that's what we're facing. So the concrete things you all can do, send donations to organizations like Federation, Hatzalah, Magen David Adom. 2 ambulances from Magen David Adom were destroyed, the medics inside killed. This really isn't an Israel-Hamas war. It's not David and Goliath. This is an Israel-Iran war. They're responsible for all the things that we see transpiring today. We're also taught in our Torah, and I was going to talk about something with our Parsha, which I skipped, but I'll quickly say this to make a tie-in to our Torah lesson. It says, God says to Cain when he kills Abel, first of all, where's your brother? And he says, Hashomer achi anochi, am I my brother's keeper? And that's the point. We are our brother's keeper. But it also says, Dameh achicha soakim elai min adama. The blood. The blood of your brethren cries out from the ground. And now it has to cry to us. We're also told in our Torah to remember Amalek. Blot out the memory of Amalek. Why is that? Because people have a tendency to forget painful things. It's in our DNA. It's why women forget the pain of childbirth. And when we forget the past, what happens? we create the conditions for evil to be repeated. So that's why we have to Al tishkach timchet zecher Amalek mitachar hashamayim. Wipe out the memory of Amalek from the heavens. Al tishkach. Don't forget. We have to keep remembering. In this way, the Torah is really more insightful than modern psychology. I want to leave you with one more text. Very powerful text. I was teaching this in Kohelet Rabbah to Weber students when I was teaching a class there. Rabbi Eliezer says in the Tanchuma, those who are compassionate to the cruel will end up being cruel to the compassionate. That is a very powerful lesson. The way it is in Midrash Kohelet Rabbah is a little bit different. It says, if you are compassionate in a time that calls for cruelty, you will end up being cruel in a time that calls for compassion. It's a spot-on lesson. It's going to be difficult. There's going to be cruelty. There's going to be terrible suffering. But a country's first obligation, first and foremost, is to protect the lives of its citizens. Imagine if Canada sent over 1,000 terrorists in hang gliders and started massacring women, men, and children and beheading them in Buffalo, New York. The United States would not be worrying about the rules of armed conflict. We would be responding with all our force. Israel is going to act ethically. It's going to hold up those rules. But Hamas is going to try everything they can to keep Israel from acting in a humanitarian, decent way. So I hope everyone will please remember this isn't just Israel's fight. This really is decency fighting against indecency. And I appreciate all of you who are here from our community and from beyond the Jewish community, standing in solidarity with us at this difficult time. Hashomer achi anochi, am I my brother's keeper? The resounding answer to that is absolutely yes, we are. And also, Am Yisrael Chai. That is the battle cry. There's two really. Am Yisrael Chai, the people of Israel live. We already sang it. I won't sing it again. We'll sing it during Kiddush. But the other cry is Chazak ve'ematz. That's what Israelis say to their soldiers when they're going into harm's way. Be strong. Have good courage. We all need it today. Amen.